right. Well, welcome back, everybody. It's Chris and Jeff from The Thriving Doctor. And today we are going to be talking about boundaries. Jeff, how did this topic come up for us?
It's a theme that we've heard in a number of our coaching encounters with doctors, both in group settings and in individual settings. And it is intimately tied to that sense of an overflowing plate.
Yeah, yeah. And, some of the things that I heard when I was listening to the doctors that we were working with were requests to take on a new role, maybe even higher responsibility. Sometimes it might be in the way of a demand for like seeing more patients. It may be like, oh, I see that you are interested in, or you are in the department now for a while, and would you like to, take on this committee lead or be the chair of something? And also some demands, or not even demands, but requests from people outside work. We'd really love it if you could get home on time and things like this. What are some other, I guess, requests that push the question of boundaries that you heard from some of our clients?
Well, in our conversation prepping for this call, you mentioned one that I thought was great, which is the patient's request to spend time on a variety of different diagnoses, complaints, topics that exceed the ability to happen within a single session. So that felt like something that probably many docs experience. And yeah, that's the one that comes to mind immediately.
All right. Well, I think that's a great model because I know that doctors see this every single day. Every time they see a patient, there's going to be a request and there's going to be a kind of a agenda setting moment to decide what we can get done today. And even though I don't feel like that was like a lot of what our patients, our clients had brought up as their main thing for boundaries, it is something that we're good at, which I think is being able to listen to the request of our patients, knowing that we want to maintain a very good relationship with them, knowing that we can help them, but that we cannot do all the things that they may be requesting. Maybe it's like abdominal pain plus this rash plus this vaginal itching plus this ear pain plus this, and on and on. And one thing I think that is important as we talk about boundaries is that it's not just a yes/no binary. And oftentimes people think that boundaries is about saying no. And in this case, when you're with your patients, it's not about saying no, but it's about understanding what's important for them, acknowledging the significance for them, understanding my own limitations and the resources that I have, and then being able to come to an agreement where both of us can do the thing that is going to be helpful for both of us.
Yeah, and I think this is a great way to get this conversation started. And I think you're right that physicians are good at creating these kind of boundaries. And I'm asking myself, okay, so why is that? And a couple of ideas that I have are, number one, I think they can feel good about what they want to accomplish during that particular encounter with the patient by setting boundaries. Like if I want to take care of the problem that I believe is the most pressing, and which I think the patient feels is most pressing too. And if we spend more time on these other things, that'll pull us away from my doing my job as well as I possibly can. So that's part of it. Part of it is also knowing they've got a container in which they're supposed to be seeing this patient. And if they spend more time, that's going to have a ripple effect that they can pretty clearly see what the consequences will be. So um, they take control and make decisions that are aligned with what they feel is them doing their job the best way they can.
Yes. And also recognizing that the person who's requesting um, the, the thing also has important and significant needs that that we need to hear, and then we're like, um, we may have maybe different opinions a little bit about what's important and what's a priority. And so we have to come together to decide on what priorities we're going to actually tackle today in this 20-minute, maybe hour, depending on what your time period is. And I just want to acknowledge that sometimes when there's that kind of request, that in the PQ language that we were talking about, positive intelligence model that Jeff and I coach around, that sometimes triggers a response of what we call saboteur or judge, and you kind of notice yourself go. You got more constricted as the requests build. And let's just be real about this for a second. When someone asks you something and you already feeling a little bit tight in your time and things like that, how do you manage this kind of experience that you're having so that the response that you have is going to really be a thoughtful response that is going to be helpful for yourself and the other person?
Right. So I think the commonplace saboteur driven response is aligned with this negative energy of I don't have time for this, and that kind of sucks you down into a hole that it's hard to get out of. You can have that same response with your chest out and shoulders back and say, I don't have time for this. This isn't the right way for the best way for us to be having a productive encounter today. And so now go into it with let's quickly figure out what are the important things that we need to be focusing on now. And so how do you get yourself into this mode as opposed to this mode? Um, Part of it is maybe work that you've done upstream of this encounter, work that you do day after day to try and keep yourself, we use the term mentally fit as possible. We use these little almost mini mindfulness activities of that we call PQ reps. One of which a favorite of many docs is rubbing two fingers together, paying such attention that you notice the ridges on the fingertips. So something like that, where you're focusing intently on a single source of sensory input, you could do in that moment to try and what that does is pull us out of our midbrain or saboteur brain and into a different region in the brain that can look at this challenge very differently. So I think something like that, we call it getting our hand off the hot stove, is an important skill for us all to have.
Yeah, that's great. I think it in the PQ framework, there's this recognition that we're in this state when somebody requests something, and that is not a good state to make a decision, right? That's just not a good state. And when we recognize that we're in this state, then I think a important reflex may be to recognize you're there, and if you can, find some way to create space so that you can get into a mindset that is going to be able to be productive for yourself and the person who's requesting. Now, I want to take it out of the time pressured 20-minute office visit, because where I want to go to is where many of our clients have been, struggling with. And this is like a request from administrators, for instance, to take on a new responsibility or role. And when you when one hears that, they might notice like, oh God, like I'm already get coming home late. I'm already doing all these charts, and they're feeling, more constricted and more constricted. And in those instances, though, there's always the option to pause, to ask for some time to think about this. And I think that that allows one to be able to make a better decision about how this request is going to align with, what their work is in the world, or where they are right now in their life. So maybe one tool here is to request some time to think about it once I can get into a state of mind that allows me to really weigh where this fits into my value system.
Yeah, and just to add, that initial response um, may not feel like the oh no kind of response that you described. It may still be saboteur driven, but it might be more like about how others will see you by getting this on your resume, or we call one of the saboteurs is called the hyperachiever, and it's about building esteem, particularly as viewed through the eyes of others. So, if it's about this will make me look good, I should go for this, that may also be saboteur energy behind it. And another reason why creating this little pause to reflect back on the situation before saying, giving your decision makes sense.
Can I share another saboteur that's really common in these requests is the pleaser. And the pleaser says, well, the most important thing for me to create good relationships, I have to say yes to everything. Even if I don't want to do it, I'm just going to have to say yes because I kind of want to maintain this relationship, or I want to, look good in the eyes of my supervisor. So yes, 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 yes. And that's kind of like the pleaser saboteur. And by recognizing that these saboteurs are speaking, and taking some space to kind of sort it all out. Here's another tool I think is really important when someone requests something of you, that is kind of moving towards a boundary of time, energy, etc., is to really begin to reflect on what's most important to me right now in my life. So there's a prioritization, there's a values piece of it, but there's also, of those values, what am I prioritizing as number one, two, three, so that I can kind of work out like where is this request falling into this priority. And of course, we always have urgent things. And oftentimes we put these urgent things as number one, even though like as in the level of importance, they're not that. So maybe the request is something I really do want to do, but I do feel packed for time. So maybe there's an innovative way where I can say yes to this and deal with this urgent thing that's kind of there, but somehow recognize where it really falls in the priority list, and find someone to help to take away the time investment in that piece.
Yeah, I think that pleaser saboteur phenotype is one that is often prominent in folks that we're working with, and many kind of feel like that's just part of the job. It's to say yes and not, be a good citizen, something like that. And so, that clearly gets in the way of you doing what's best for you and what's aligned with those priorities. So some of those things that you've previously said yes to maybe are better served by somebody else doing them. It's not necessarily you saying no. It's here's another saboteur that we see often in physicians is a controller. So, um, many are opportunities to delegate or ask for help as opposed to feeling like I got to be the one doing it myself. It's on my plate. And if I want it done right, I got to be the one to do it, except you haven't really completed the task yet. It's sitting there, as something on your plate. It's not off your plate yet. So making room for what you're being asked to do and want to do by getting that off your plate, handing it off to someone who has the time and ability and interest to do it, could be a win-win.
Yeah, I think there's, some reflection about what's impactful, what expertise do I have, where do I want to grow and put energy into, how do I think I can best use my time, and then strategizing around kind of how to move things around so that you can do that. I want to go into how do we prioritize and what is important, because that's not obvious. It's really not obvious as to how you determine what's important. And to use some of the lingo of positive intelligence, what are some of the ways that once you realize, maybe I'm not in the right state right now to make a decision, I'm going to pause, and now I am in a calmer, more productive, creative state here. What types of ways can we start to recognize what's important in our life, and then how to prioritize, so then I can realize where I need to how to respond to this request?
So one of what we call the sage powers, one of the positive emotional centers that I think can be quite helpful for us to tap into, particularly for like bigger decisions, is what we call navigating or visiting with our wiser elder self. So, imagining yourself being near the end of your life and looking back on the fork in the road where you are right now, and that wiser version of yourself from the future looks back with their acquired wisdom through the years and gives you guidance as to what would be most important for you to be considering now. That gets you connected with your inner core of purpose, what's most fulfilling to you, what's how you want to be in the world, what kind of legacy you want to have, what's right for you. So I think that's a very powerful guide for us that we don't listen to often enough.
Yeah, sometimes I like calling it the long view. Let's look at the
Mhm.
long view here. Like, where am I really headed? Where am I really aiming towards? And does this request, help me move towards that? And if it does, but I don't feel like I have the time, maybe I can work out another way to be able to step into some of this, with what I do have, or start to rearrange things, to be able to honor the request, or also to recognize that right now maybe this isn't going to be helpful for myself, and therefore, not helpful for you. And then to how do we say no in a way that is helpful? So I think that's another piece of it, like, and that there's all this kind of in between of yes and no, of, we can work something out that's going to be helpful for both of us, in striving for the thing that we know is important and significant that the person's requesting, but also recognizing what's important and significant for us.
Yeah, I want to just mention one other sage power that I feel we'll be coming back to often in our sessions, and that's empathy for ourselves. Because I think part of the saboteur energy, a big part of the saboteur energy, is this feeling of um, like shame, guilt. If we were to feel like we would say no, that somehow we say that, this is our responsibility and I've got to suck it up and do what I'm asked to do. And so tapping into your empathy for yourself and allow yourself to look without judgment at yourself, and love yourself, making a statement that is compassionate about you in this situation can help you begin to figure out, all right, this is how I'm truly feeling. And now, what does that mean? What do I do with that new way of looking at this situation?
I think that's so important. It's so important. One, because I think it helps you to be able to communicate more clearly um, why, why this is going to be a no, or, not yet, or maybe in a different form of your request. And then, which is so important, like the effective communication around a request and boundaries and things is so important. The second piece of it is that we have to be, in a way, anticipating the negative emotion that may come with saying no. You know, that is okay to feel that way, and it may even be anticipated. It doesn't always feel good when someone asks you, and it's not working for you right now. And then what all the things that you said, maybe shame, maybe guilt, maybe, oh my gosh, I'm not being a good partner, all these things that kind of come up, and recognizing there's a self-compassion there that can feel okay about having those emotions, but recognizing that overall it's going to be the best for both sides. Well, I did want to offer another idea about empathy, though, as we're on this subject, and that is there's empathy for ourselves and there's also empathy for the other. And in this case, it's also important that we recognize that this person probably has a really good idea. This administrator is looking at the big picture here and recognizing they need a leader who's good, who has skills, who has knowledge to be able to help this idea move forward, or organize these people to do the thing. That's a good idea, and I think it's important to understand what the request is, to appreciate, that somebody is believing in you enough to ask you this thing, and that you have the skill to do this thing, and then to consider, how can I be helpful in this situation? Maybe it is 100% yes, or maybe it is, I really like your idea. Let's think about some other ways that we can help with this vision that you hold, that uses maybe some of my resource, or I can find someone else who does the thing, but still kind of keeping in mind where they're coming from.
Yeah, and one thing that just popped into my head from back in my patient safety days that I think pertains to this. We talked about using driving and the speed limit as an example, that oftentimes people feel that it's safe to drive at least 5-7 miles above the speed limit, particularly when you're on a highway. The more you normalize those ranges of being that are outside of what you're supposed to be doing, the closer it brings you to areas that are potentially actually at risk. So, if you start thinking, well, 75 is just as safe as 55 on this highway, how much riskier is that really, particularly if you think that that's normal? So what are we used to experiencing compared with what we um, might say is the most desirable way of us having our life organized,
Yeah.
and how might we be able to bring ourselves back to what we want to be like the speed limit for ourselves.
Yeah. I like that. I like that analogy. All right. Well, maybe we can begin to wrap up this session and think about some tools when your boundaries are starting to be pushed and there's a request from somebody, and what can I do to make sure that I'm making the best decision that is going to serve both myself and the other person, the requester. What are maybe a couple things um, that come to mind for you in this situation?
So I think number one, recognizing when you're responding in a saboteur way. I think that's an important skill for folks that are watching this video and all our videos to try and become increasingly aware of. So whether it be what you're hearing yourself say to yourself, the tension that you're feeling in your body, and other physical manifestations, just recognizing this is saboteur energy and not making a decision when that's the case. If you've got to make a decision quickly, you're in the exam room with the patient, doing something like PQ reps to pull yourself out of it, if just saying to yourself, this is saboteur mode, doesn't get your hand off that metaphorical hot stove by itself. And like you said, putting a pause in before replying when you've got the ability to do that, so that you can take your time and make sure you're using the parts of your brain and decision making ability wisely to make the decision that you want, that's aligned with who you want to be, is really important.
Yeah. And just to add to that, a pause, like Jeff said, could be a few breaths. A pause could be a week, it could be some time. And during that pause, you will, bring yourself to a state of peace for a moment and then really consider what's important to you and where your priorities are. And I often will ask or lean on my wife or another trusted person to just bounce off some ideas. So that's part of the pause for me. It's not all on me. I might even ask a mentor or a supervisor or something and be vulnerable enough to share kind of the different aspects of where I'm looking at different things. So I think the pause, I just want to say like what happens in the pause. It's not just like pausing, but it's also maybe collaborating with others. And then I think the last piece of it is really recognizing that boundaries are between two people, usually the requester and then yourself, and that the requester has an idea, and that idea you may or may not be able to embrace fully, but maybe there's something in between that can still, first of all, acknowledge, of course, the significance of what this requester is asking, but then also that you can help in some way. And that may not be the full request that they had, but maybe you two can maybe innovate a little bit to see where you can help them in their need, while also staying in your own speed limit lane, right? Like I'm not going faster or than I want to be staying and to be inside my self-care place.
Yeah, and just toss out, like we talked about, the backward looking perspective can be so helpful, particularly around big decisions. For smaller ones, probably not so necessary, but for big ones in life, new roles, new cities, things like that, I think that's really important to bring into the mix.
Great. All right. Well, to all of you watching this video, there's going to be many opportunities for you to practice understanding your own boundaries and being able to recognize when you're kind of like, triggered by that. Practice, the pause and how that serves you most, and then practice making great decision making and building that skill. Until next time, take care.
See ya.